I'm an attorney at Adler, Pollock and Sheen here in Providence, and I've been doing this for about 33 years. I see Tim Moore was here, and I've known Tim my whole career. I do a lot of real estate and land use work. I've done a lot on the east side here in Providence and College Hill, from Riverview on the waterfront over to downtown, and worked with Rick Brady on 2 Angell Street, historic preservation. So I've played in the arena quite a bit, and represented Ed Small, who's with me tonight. Ed is a principal of Smart Hotels, and Ed's been looking in Providence for nearly a decade for a boutique hotel site. He'll tell you a little bit about what Smart Hotels does and why they do it. And then I'll jump back in and do a little bit of land use and put it in context from the zoning and planning history. I know many of you through a lot of the various issues that have come up over the years, from Thayer Street to I-195 and back. And then Eric Zuena will, from ZDS Architecture, will present the concept for this site. We're talking about 209, 211, and 217 Angell Street, which is on the corner of Angell and Brook, exactly one block west of this very site, and bordered by Angell, Brook, and Funds Alley. So that's the presentation. Just again to orient you, we're here, as you know, on the corner of Hope and Angell. This site's one block west. I happen to live 2 blocks south on George Street between Hope and Brook, so I walk by the site frequently and I'm very familiar with it. Also procedurally where we are, just so you know, we've asked to be on these public meetings and get some community feedback. We're in the process and have applied to the City of Providence for a zone change and a master plan approval with a unified application review at the City Planning Commission. We're early in the process, having just filed the applications, and but we have met with many of the neighbors, not all of the neighbors, but many of the neighbors, including the institutional neighbors of the Vedanta Society of Wheeler School on Brown. So this is one of our first community meetings through a formal organization like the College Hill Neighborhood Association, and we're very happy that you have us tonight. So with that, I'll introduce Ed Small. Ed will talk to you about his concept and the concept of Smart Hotels and what they're about. And then I'll jump back in, as I said, and we'll go to Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and good evening, everybody. And first, let me broaden that singular to more plural. My partner, Johnny Adams, is here. He's CEO of Smart Hotels. I'm president, and we're pleased to see you here. We develop hotels for campuses and communities in neighborhoods that have similarities to this one. Similar how? The fact that you're all here tonight says that you care, and that you're probably passionate, and that there are probably a variety of opinions, and we're looking forward to hearing those. It's sort of that passion and commitment and interest in neighborhoods such as this one that got us started on this quest to develop campus hotels at upper echelon universities around the country. And I tell people, and those of us that know it, because they've seen us here this long, Rob being one of them, and the bishops or others, we've been coming here since 2009, just trying to find a site that could work in a good way, could work to provide the amenity for the universities that we serve as demand generators, but also the communities, because everything that we do is oriented to the community as well. So in terms of who our team is, we like to work with people that are local to the specific project site. And with Rob, who again is just a matter of some streets away, and also with Eric and with the bishops, we have very much local content to who our team is, and they help us identify what is truly local, what is truly authentic to the locale that we're trying to develop in. Each project that we do is customized to its particular site and to the community that we're going into. And so it's natural at this early stage where we're just coming out with a concept and with a general massing and a general configuration to a site that one would tend to read into it that This is really just the general shape of the building as we're talking about it, and even that is likely to evolve as we continue to receive feedback. We've received some feedback already from neighbors immediately adjacent to the site, from institutional stakeholders nearby, and from certain city departments. And we're here tonight, again, as Rob pointed out, we sought this meeting because we wanted to meet you person to person, group to group, and get your feedback. And hopefully we'll return in the future and continue to show you a project that will continue to evolve, and hopefully that you'll find to be responsive to the comments that we receive. And if it's at any point today already, if there's anything about our project you like, our hope and expectation would be that as we continue to go through the process with you, that you'll like it even more. So among the things that we try and do is talk about our approach to development, because it's not as if we invented the College Inn and can claim credit to it, nor would we, because when we got into this business and decided on this focus, we thought there was something that needed to be updated about the hotels that were serving both campuses and campus communities. And among those things was to be more cognizant of urban development principles, sustainability, and the like. Also to approach a project from the start in a more integrated fashion. Oftentimes the college inns were built by colleges without concern about the community overall. And as in this case, we're developing a site that is not owned by Brown or RISD or anybody else that's an institution. It's owned by a family, Ed Bishop of which has wanted for decades, even longer than I, to develop a hotel to serve this community. So as we go through this process, we're going to invite your feedback tonight, and we're going to continue to ask for it down the road. You may know some of us, you may know the bishops personally. We're seeking that input. Don't feel that you need to wait for a focused meeting such as this. The triple bottom line approach that we talk about starts with community. And so, notwithstanding that others in this room may feel otherwise about some of the approaches we're taking here, we very much feel that this hotel and a hotel in this site can serve you, your families, as you get people coming in, can help us promote your neighborhood. When we come into a neighborhood, we become very much boosters of that community. A hotel project that we opened in Chicago recently, Sophie Hyde Park, is in a neighborhood that is somewhat neglected by Chicagoans. We often say that Hyde Park's going to be last discovered by the Chicagoans themselves. It's a great community. It's where President and Michelle Obama had the brownstone. It's got the University of Chicago. It has the Museum of Science and Industry. And yet it's a neighborhood that hadn't had a new hotel in 50 years, and that was a hotel that none of us would stay in because it was such how can I put it, uninviting place. And yet with our two hotels out now that we've developed since 2013, we're now part of that community very much. And we came in and we started a process just as this one's starting, where people had questions about us. And when you're a developer, you've got a target on your back and people have all sorts of notions. Hopefully you'll find out that we're not as smart as most developers. We actually embrace process. We like complex projects. We like to work in communities such as this one where we're going to get feedback. And while we may not be so smart because these projects are somewhat harder, we ultimately find them much more satisfying on the back end. We don't build for short term and flip the properties. We have an indefinite time frame that we look at things. And so we would look forward to being part of your community for years to come. Among the benefits that we would look at and hope that the community might perceive for our project would be, in addition to the obvious, the hotel accommodation. We also would hope to have a restaurant that would service our guests, of course, but also would be a modest-sized but welcoming restaurant for the neighborhood. When we look at a boutique hotel such as this one, we know that we can't be successful unless the neighborhood embraces our project. So as with the Sophie Hyde Park, that's become the place for the neighbors to go and for them to have their social engagements and to enjoy their evening after work, or a nice romantic dinner, or to bring friends to, and to engage in all sorts of levels. Beyond that, we look to do local hiring. We're very committed to hiring from as close a proximity as we can. It will relate to probably some of the questions some of you may have about parking and traffic and such. The orientation we have is very much to a pedestrian-oriented project. I think it was suggested in one of the blogs, people are forwarding me the blog comments as they're coming in, why don't they do this a mile away? Well, we've looked at sites over the past 10 years that have been in that relative range. We looked, down by Wicked Inn and Main Street and other places, and honestly, we're all about proximity. It's all about being exactly where these visitors want to be. For the most part, the visitors that would be staying in our hotel are visitors that are already coming here, or the type that are already coming here. So we're not bringing new people in necessarily that wouldn't be on College Hill. We're just trying to make that immersion much more successful for them, to have a better first impression, a longer lasting impression, to have them get to know College Hill in a way that you know it, at least for a few days. I know when I travel, maybe some of you are the same, I look for hotels such as that, because I want to feel, even if it's only a day or two or three, that I'm living in that neighborhood for those days. And I think you truly, most sincerely, have a very special neighborhood. You have a great city, as a matter of fact. And so we would be promoting that. We also, by the tendency to bring the guests in so close, we support local retail. And while you don't have a lot of it, I think at least within the specific section of Brook that we're on, there's a chance for some of the new developments to have retail on the first floor there. I think our guests would be supportive of that. They're going to be looking for walk-to amenities such as that. We hope to add to the placemaking on Brook Street. While you have beautiful structures all around, that immediate section of Brook has an opportunity, for example, on the Citizens Bank site, eventually by Brown, I'm sure, but also on this site and others, to create an orientation for Brook Street that is a little bit more unified and complementary to what could be existing, and without having everything strictly located on their street, to allow you to expand a little bit over to Brook, at least in the southern end of it. We also hope to contribute in the way of paying taxes. We're not going to be looking for tax relief. We feel that while we're asking for some accommodations to get this project done, we feel one of the benefits that we can offer to the community in addition to hiring, and that's probably in the range of more than 60 full-time equivalent jobs, and the payroll taxes that will be associated with those, also to pay real estate taxes that will benefit the community overall. So before I take up too much time, and I'm sure you should know that we're going to be allowing for questions and feedback and dialogue, but I wonder if Eric can pick up from here and talk about the project and the context, and not the architecture that he's already started to sketch out, but the general idea that he's working on. So Eric?
Thank you. Well, I'll start by saying how refreshing this is to have a client and a developer coming in from outside of Providence, outside of Rhode Island, that knows exactly what he's getting into and knows the area just as well as we do. So he really stole my thunder in hitting a lot of my talking points, but I'm going to jump right in, and I know that Rob is probably going to help contribute to some of these initial discussions about zoning and master planning, and also how we've been dealing with, or at least our understanding of, the comprehensive plan. So this is a site plan that started the discussion about.
Sir, your
Yes.
name?
Eric Zuena, Z-U-E-N-A, Managing Principal for CBS Architecture and Interiors. Last time I was in this room was to speak to you folks about 249 Thayer Street, which is a project that we recently wrapped up, which we're really proud of, and you guys were very instrumental in that collaboration, that development and design. This being a different animal for a number of reasons, and I'll start by just talking about our zoning. So here you have Brook Street and Angell, and we're all familiar with what's happening on Thayer Street, but this is our commercial zone here. Wheeler School is across the street, and these are the three residential lots. It's an RP zone currently that are just at this corner. We're flanked to the south by a C1 zone, and this obviously being much of the institutional zone, educational zone of Brown University. The Vedanta Society is here. And so, when we first looked at the site, we were really focusing our attention along Angell, and we were looking east to west, but then we started to really think about what's happening north to south. And this site that sits in this little pocket is a site that really seems to be understudied over the years, and Ed and Rob came to ZDS to talk about it. and the Bishop family as well. And they were about 6-7 steps ahead of us, but we scratched our heads for a bit and realized just how much this site does check the boxes for what we would consider an infill opportunity. So that started the discussion, but we recognize that we have a very, very strong residential community here, and we're always traveling, or at least I am mostly traveling in a vehicle from east to west, and coming down to this corner and recognizing this intersection is sort of a point of transition. And this street, Brook Street, is a transition. It's a seam. It's an understudied seam. And so, while we know things are happening on this C12 zone, maybe in the relative near future, we anticipate a mid-rise structure here, and also to the north, an institutional facility. We certainly recognize this site as the opportunity that we wanted to explore further. So we immediately accepted the opportunity, the challenge, and we sort of started to think about how we would respond from a design aesthetic. I will echo Ed's sentiments about design. While we have put a lot of thought into what this building looks like and the shape of it and how to get the program to fit inside of it, there are a lot of placeholders here, and the reason for these meetings ahead of all the public hearings that we'll have to move through to move this project forward, we actually are here to hear more from you folks than listening to me. So I'll move through this presentation relatively quickly, and will not spend too much time on the context since you know it so well. But the four immediate precedents that we looked at for good and bad reason are, this is our site plan showing our site on the corner. This is the 249th Thayer Street project with Shake Shack on the first floor, Brown Entrepreneurial Ship School on the second, third, and fourth, which was a great infill project. To the top right is Minden Hall, which sort of anchors us to the south, which we'll talk more about in a minute. Our immediate neighbor to the east is the Vedanta Society, which we spent time with over the past couple of weeks now. And then on the bottom right is the Wheeler School. The Wheeler School, being across the street, has a lot of dynamics and unique qualities to it's the way it operates, its function, and also we were sort of inspired by the architecture, which I think you'll probably see some similarities as we move forward. So this is the backside. This is Phones Alley looking towards the northeast at the three residential lots in this RP zone. Again, I won't spend too much time on it. These are pictures looking from Angell Street looking towards the west, giving you a better understanding of the fronts of the structures at the top and back at the rear, at the bottom here. But this view towards the south is something that we spent a lot of time on. It also shows in this picture just what it looks like, maybe a little bit south of the intersection of Minden Hall in the background and what we anticipate happening. This is just the existing two-story Citizens Bank building now, but what we intend, what we could envision there going forward. This is the relationship between the Wheeler School on the corner, our site, Citizens Bank building, and Minden Hall here. And so we really were inspired by the density of what's happening to the south, and we're really thinking that we're kind of pulling that towards us to meet this corner of Brook and Angell, and we think that's significant. We also recognize that this corridor is a corridor that will be developed, and developing both sides of the street is something really important for its success. These are sectional studies that we've done. I'm sorry, the scale is relatively small, so you can't see what every building is marked, but maybe you recognize a few just based on the massing. What it shows is our yellow structure is the property that we're discussing today. This is a section cut in both directions, one from east to west and the other from north to south. And it's showing what we think to be relatively nestled into this site fairly well. And we'll talk more about that as we progress this conversation. But the site is dynamic. There are a lot of unique qualities. There's sort of an intersection of many different things happening. And it took some time for us to get our arms around all of them. But I'll summarize. This inside edge of the east side is something really important to us. From the very beginning, when Ed and his team came to us to talk about design and massing, we immediately started drawing what we would consider a U-shape or a C-shaped structure, trying to get people. We recognize that traffic is important. Getting people on and off Angell Street in a timely manner is important. And also making this transition from the east to the west west with massing. We certainly are coming out of a residential zone going into a C zone, so we recognize that it was important for us to give as much relief as we could to this inside edge of our property. So this is that view. This is the view of providing that relief on this inside edge. This view also discusses how people would in a vehicle would move off the street into a covered porte-cochere zone. You would be greeted by a bellhop. This is a full-service hotel. You would be greeted by a bellhop. You would exit your vehicle. Your luggage would be taken into the hotel. That bellhop would then jump in your car, come back onto Angell, get to the intersection, take a left onto Brooks Street, go east on Phones Alley, and then enter into sub-grade parking, which I'll show you in a second. And I'm sorry that might have sounded a little confusing, but if I go back to the site plan, the direction of travel would be come off the property, drop off in a covered porte-cochere area, come back onto Angell Street, left onto Brook, left onto Phones Alley, and into the basement. And in that basement is 40 parking spaces.
Can I just pause you there?
Please.
So important to note here that the cars would be handled strictly by valet. So whatever is in taxi or Uber and the like would have a valet take the car. And so we want, once people arrive, we want them to give up their cars, hopefully. We hope they have a shuttle. We want to be able to accommodate them. Much of where they want to go is walk to. What they can't get to by walking, we'll accommodate them by shuttle. We hope that your bike sharing opportunities come back, because we think that's a great way to explore College Hill as well. And we're going to be charging for the valet parking. And so the incentive is going to be, don't bring your car. You're not going to need it here. So I just wanted to point that out, that everything that Eric's going to talk about in terms of flow, when you see the parking, that works well in part because we have a valet operation.
Just to speak on that too, a similar project we did, the Home and Suites downtown, right at Memorial Boulevard. That was a discussion about parking as well. We put that's 120 keys, and we put 40 lifts in the first floor, and it's certainly on trend to see a decrease in parking needs, especially for our hospitality use. The more and more the hotels we design, the less and less our clients are looking for the parking counts that zoning typically would require. It's also refreshing to speak to the city and get the same sort of response and sentiment about parking. We're really seeing that Providence, we as a design firm, architectural firm, are forward thinkers about where parking is going, and so to put so much regulation and to be so strict about parking requirements for our hotel is where we're learning to be more and more of a mistake as time progresses. So again, this is that view, whether it be Uber, shuttle, your own vehicle, or any other sort of shared vehicular experience, you would get dropped off in this zone. So back to the first floor. And again, we've had several meetings, so we've actually sort of started to respond to some of the things that we're getting feedback on, and we'll continue to do that when we hear back from you folks as well. But the program on the first floor lays out pretty simply. I may have a better plan of it, a little zoomed in, so you guys in the rear can see it well. But this is that drop-off entry into what we would consider a pretty modest lobby lounge reception desk here. Small meeting room for gatherings, whether it be for community opportunities or things that are happening inside the hotel. This is where we're meeting the corner with this restaurant venue space, and that is an all-day dining restaurant, not just for the hotel guests, but also the general public, sort of communicating an open kitchen sort of experience that would really liven up.
Please don't move your pointer so fast, because even back here we don't see it.
Okay.
If you just hold it and play it one position longer, I think we will.
Okay, is that help? Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll take that into consideration. Thank you. But meeting this corner with an entry door was important. It was sort of our way of celebrating the entry to the restaurant, also receiving the community here. We also started with a grander exterior space, but we learned in these climates in New England that exterior space is not always utilized because of colder climates. So we're being cautious of just recessing the first floor with an overhang, which you'll see better in the rendering, and really making this restaurant something special. If you go to this rendering is showing us a bird's eye view from the corner looking towards the southeast side of the property. And so that exterior dining experience we're communicating right here at the ground floor, and you're also getting a better understanding of the arrival experience that's happening on this side. We'll come back to those views in a minute. This is the lower level showing the 40+ parking spaces below grade. This is Phone's Alley down here, and this is your entry in to the lower level for parking. There's also additional back of house spaces on this back corner. Standard floor, just double loaded corridor in an L-shaped format. Again, really anchoring Brooks and Phone's with the massing we thought was really important, and giving all the relief we could to this front corner for daylighting, for vehicular access, for pedestrian access, et cetera, et cetera. Standard elevations that may not be as clear as they could be from all the way in the back, so I won't spend too much time on them, but it's giving you just a better understanding of the massing, of the materiality of the proportions that we were playing with materiality to sort of break down the scale a bit, which we could talk about as well. And you know, we're doing a lot of studies, some of which we brought tonight. The one that we thought was most important to show was the sun studies that we're doing, both summer solstice and winter solstice, just to give an understanding of what we think we're accomplishing with the massing that we have versus other massing strategies that we've studied in the past. But this L-shaped massing really keeps daylight on Angell, keeps views from the Vedanta Society, that front corner of Vedanta, or the northwest corner of that property. After being in the space, we clearly recognize its importance, and so we feel even stronger about the massing being stepped off Angell Street on that inside edge. And this sun study is showing just how well we're preserving that daylight onto these opportunities. Winter, you know, we decided just this morning, that winter is very difficult to communicate the successes of it because we're facing the wrong direction. So we're going to turn our views, and next time you see this presentation, you'll be looking at the sun that still shines on the Wheeler School, and that this building does not take away from that. But I think that this study, looking at this view, is not really helping us at this time. So we'll continue to work on that. And I think, so that's a summary of the presentation. Rob, I think it's probably helpful if you could add any key points to this map.
When Ed first called me and we talked about the site, I asked him, I said, can I call you back? My immediate reaction was not very enthusiastic. And then I walked over there on my way back from work that night, and I noticed from Meeting Street all the way down to George Street, we have an unusual occurrence on Brook Street that's different than the rest of the scene, if you will. We have Pembroke Field, but then we have the mass of the Wheeler School, our site, Citizens Bank Building, this is Minden. Then we have Prince Lab, the engineering building, and on the corner of George and Brook, we have the Philip Johnson building that was, I think, from the late 60s, early 70s, which used to house the computer sciences lab for Brown. And I think it's still in the computer and applied math arena. It's used. So you have and then you get back to some residential and residential use. And then, so I'm very much aware of the history of the discussions over the last 5 years we've had on Thayer Street and not wanting to have encroachment to Hope Street of commercial activity. And Hope Street needs to be protected. And I'm a big believer in that. But with the Vedanta Society here and the auditorium building, which is a little auditorium next to us, you've got that mass in that block. So this site is 3 structures that are in different states of repair and different opportunities. And the Bishop family can continue to use them in the residential professional manner, which means maximizing the residential portion, most likely, apartments, and what comes with that. And this opportunity struck me as something that is consistent with the existing surrounding uses. But that's only one portion of the analysis. So then I went back and I looked at the city's comprehensive plan, because this is in the residential professional zone, which does not permit a hotel. So the analysis we did is, well, we need to change this to a zone that's within the city's comprehensive planning anticipated uses that does permit a hotel. And across the street, we have all these C2, this is all commercial 2, and this is commercial 1, and this is all institutional, but these commercial zones allow the hotel. So my thinking was, and going through all the, about 270 pages of the comp plan, not including the mapping, I came up with about a dozen opportunities to be consistent with the comp plan, where we talk about economic development, which is the easy one, because that means whatever you want it to mean, I get that. But even when we talk about preservation, commercial corridors, seams, and being sensitive to the history, historic nature of the areas, I think there's and believe pretty firmly, there's a great opportunity for us to consider this as a commercial use, not to move commercial uses further east, but to create a more active corridor from George Street up to Angell Street, and one that will maximize the pedestrian benefit of those, and that's something to embrace. And I think it creates a great opportunity for that. Then went to the zoning ordinances itself and looked at massing, et cetera. And we understand that there's that we have to go to the City Planning Commission and get relief for the height that we're asking, which are called adjustments, and show that we can demonstrate that these are adjustments that are required to accomplish the beneficial use. And Ed's been pretty frank about this. We'd like community support for this. If this isn't going to be one of those big battles, this is going to be something that we either we see some community support, and we see the notion that this can drive forward. We think it's a great opportunity to minimize some of the residential structures that have become multifamily by accident, just by the change of time. And we've been struggling with that and the perimeter of Brown for a long time. Now, some multifamilies were designed for that, and some were designed as single-family homes or 2 or 3 family homes that have gotten chopped up. So this is an opportunity to reclaim this infill parcel, consistent with the comprehensive plan, put it to good use, something the neighborhood needs. We do not have any hotel experience on College Hill, and even our discussions with the institutional institutions around see it as an that aspect of it as an opportunity for them. So we believe, to summarize, that the site is an infill site surrounded by an institutional zone and institutional uses. Is in a little bit of a understudied area from Meeting Street down to George Street, and even when I went through the neighborhood, and I participated quite a bit in the Thayer Street, Wayland Square, and College Hill studies that were done 5 years ago by the city, we had not spent a lot of time talking about this corner. And in fact, there's only one map of that, of dozens and dozens of charrette maps. This was pretty much left up to the existing uses because of Brown's dominating presence there. So that's the land use context that puts us into thinking this isn't crazy. We really think this is an opportunity that at first blush is like, whoa, that's a big building for that corner, and you got 3 whole houses there. And then when you actually step back and walk up and down Brook Street, and you say, okay, I got Minden right there. It's 1 block away. I've got the Citizens Building, which is going to change. I mean, that building should change. It's really not that attractive. And then we've got our site, and there's a nice opportunity of those 3 sites to work together massing-wise.
Let me see a couple things on the list.
I'm the guy who owns the land right now in Bishop. And would you put that map back?
Sure.
I wanted to point out a couple things which we just this afternoon pointed out to the city. Just within the last 2 months, the city plan has led to the city council passing a desire to have between Meeting Street and Waterman commercial development on the first floor, at least, of any buildings that are built in that area. trying to also make it a walking district. Now, this is never gonna change, and if people don't know, this is owned by Brown University right now, with long-term commercial development at some point relative to their science activity on this side of the campus. So those are a couple things that I think are relevant, and then nothing is final. We've taken these pictures around and gotten comments, and we are working on changes. The colors and materials are a long way from settled.
Good, yeah, sure. Yeah, at this point, I mean, I think this is a sort of a close of our initial presentation, so we're here to get some feedback from you
Josh, you want
folks
to
and
speak
answer
to the
questions.
questions?
So I'll
Yeah,
take
you can
it
come
back
over.
to Mr.
Two,
first.
just updates on two bits of information, because I hear things, but I don't know what's going on. First, going north on Brook, and where there are those parking lots along by where Flatbread is and all the rest, there was discussion that that was like a temporary holding thing, and that within a few years, something big was gonna happen there. So the first part of the question is, what's gonna happen there? You guys must have thought about it, and how do you see that fitting in, and can you just elaborate on it? The second is going the other way, which is, again, I'm not sure what's going on, but you hear discussion about trying to close the Gano Street exit, and there are people who say that's going to pump more traffic up Angell, so that's not a good idea. And I don't know whether that's gonna happen, I don't know where it is, but clearly, again, Mr. Bishop will have thought about this because he looks at the yellow school buses every day all along the avenue there as Wheeler is moving his community out and back. I don't mean to sound critical, but it's pretty glib to just hand it to a valet who's gonna whip it around the corner into the parking space, because that's a choke point. And what I guess we're saying is that eventually the plan would be to basically just stop cars there, and it's gonna become a pedestrian zone, which might be a very nice thing. But just those two elements, if you could elaborate in two ways, architecturally and also legally. Who owns those other things? Are there agreements in place? Will there be agreements in place? You guys gotta control this stuff to control your environment, or at least understand it.
I'll try to, go ahead.
Yeah, well, just legally, Mr. Bishop, the Bishop family owns the 3 lots. Angell Street, Brook Street, and Fones Alley are public ways. So all the vehicles can move without, we don't need any third-party easements, et cetera. Now, from a traffic standpoint, we can go into some great detail on this. With 130 rooms, you may have 60, 80 car movements a day, maybe 90 car movements a day. You can go through depending on the time of year, the movement, spread out throughout the day. The peak hours of entry and exit from the hotel are typically will be after Wheeler School activity in the mornings, and either before or after the key athletics drop-offs and pickups for Wheeler School. That's not to say there's not going to be congestion. There's already congestion there today. So from a vehicular movement standpoint, if it doesn't work for us, it doesn't work for anybody. It's not financially viable. So we have to be confident that we can move the cars through that. So legally, we don't see any barriers to moving the cars in the manner shown. We don't need any third-party consents or approvals or off-site parking to do that. Everything can be contained on the site. And again, from a movement standpoint, we're not talking about a convention center or large meeting hall. The room turnover, given the nature of these rooms, will be throughout the morning and afternoon.
But you
To
have
address-
checkout times, yeah?
Yeah,
To address the,
Checkout times?
yeah. That's right. Checkout times late morning.
After school begins, and then after school is dismissed. So
There's usually a choke point there, sort of, everybody's gotta be out by noon, and then you can come into your room between 3 and 5, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
People leaving a
Yeah.
hotel, people leaving in the hotel, leaving at different times of the day, depending upon if you're leaving for a business opportunity, or maybe you have an event that you're going to, in this case at the university, or at Wheeler for that matter. But your checkout, you're correct, your checkout time is typically mid-morning, right? So then people are starting to come in the afternoon and into the evening, but the higher moments of vehicular traffic are mid-morning, late afternoon. So we think it's an offset from
Actually, early evening.
early, exactly, even better, early evening, so it's an offset of a school day's schedule.
And the restaurant won't bring with it any increased car traffic? Will it only be open at night?
No, it'll bring some, but our experience is that breakfast tends to be mostly the guest in-house experience. Lunch tends to be modest in terms of the traffic typically, and if anything, it's probably more of a walk to. People today, the general tendency is now for people to drive to go to lunch. You know, we're all so busy and we're at our computers and doing whatever. So that again will be either an in-guest or a neighborhood, or maybe people coming over from the other businesses around. And so more probably active in the evening, I would say. And again, we would hope that it would
So
attract
you'll have a
people
liquor
like you.
license there?
We would hope to, yeah, just, you know, like any fine dining experience, we would hope people could
So
sit down and have
on this
dinner.
side of Brook, we have an encroaching liquor license,
Yeah, the hope would be you could sit down and have dinner and have a glass of wine, exactly.
which, well, I don't see that as a good thing. I've lived on right smack on Angell Street next door for 27 years. And, I know all about the traffic on Angell. I mean, you know, we love our house, we love our neighborhood. You know, people do live here. It's not all about Brown and all that, you know. And you use the word community like you're doing us a benefit, and, you know, come on. I see very little benefit for me, you know, and for many people in this room, so I just, you know, I think
There's two of you, how about the lady?
there's some skepticism in the room.
Well, I just wanted to say I've stayed at one of your hotels in Swarthmore many times, and it's lovely. And it actually is very well integrated into the community, and so, I mean, I'd welcome that kind of hotel in this area, but, I mean, this particular spot does seem extremely congested, and some of these other spots people are mentioning just seem more logical. I mean, I'm not an architect or a city planner, but, you know, the lot with a your flatbread seems like, for citizens, even citizens banks, like, seem better, from my point of view. It's just so congested. I mean, I had a child at Wheeler, and it's like getting around that block is very difficult. I'm also concerned about how many students are gonna be displaced when those buildings are taken down. I'm assuming that some of these buildings are student rentals, and where will those students go? Hopefully not into.
In our discussions with Brown, we understand they're planning new student housing.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot.
There are about 20 students, half of them are graduate students, the 209, and even adults. And so there are not that many students being displaced. There is office space on the first floor of 2 of the buildings right now. Gentleman back's question wasn't answered on what's going on. The site of those parking lots right now behind, by Flatbread Pizza were actually the 7 houses that was my original proposed site. Brown is building a wellness center which will include all their mental health services as well as everything that's in the infirmary building right now on Brown Street. And it's going to be an elevated building with about over 100 housing accommodations for undergraduate students who have some degree of potential handicap. So that's what's going into that site you asked. And that's going to be started this fall.
This fall.
This fall.
Here's the lady in the jacket.
Could you expand that image so that we could see the building? More, just fill it right up if you can.
I'll try.
Thank you. Even more.
It's starting to get distorted already.
That's okay.
Do you want to make your
Yeah, we
comment?
just want to see the building. We know what's around it, so we just really do want to have a better look at your building. Doesn't really matter if it's fuzzy.
Yeah, so I just want to remind the audience that this is a conceptual design phase of work. I don't want you to think that any of the colors, materials are final. These are really placeholders to spark conversation. We'd like to hear feedback if you have it, or if you have any preferences that you want us tell us what not to do. But we by no means are presenting to you a final design that we're ready that we're totally proud of at this point.
About as far as we've gone as to say, you know, the lower level probably wants to be masonry, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. But to Eric's point, the upper floor materials will be contrasting, and again, I think as you see this evolve, the scale will diminish, sort of like this is a starting point. But if we go closer, you're just gonna see an architectural attempt to depict a building facade, but we don't know what the material or colors will be. So this is not an architectural
Design
rendering.
Yeah.
This is a concept rendering showing relative building scale and use.
Well, in my opinion, very quickly, looks very cheap. Building to the left of it, is unfortunate. So whatever it doesn't really matter how it fits with the building to the left, because that's an unfortunate looking building. It looks very inexpensive. It doesn't have any of the, architectural interests that Wheeler has across the street. Yes, you've used the vertical lines to echo Wheeler's, but Wheeler's architecture is far more interesting than that building. That building looks like it could be on a strip mall in Ohio.
I promise you we'll get there. We'll get there.
Well, just the fact that you presented this for discussion,
It's a
says
first of,
something
yeah,
to me.
it's
about
the first
this
of many,
process.
it's the first of many discussions, and this is the beginning of a long process. So we'll be excited to hear more feedback from you in the future.
So just on the heels of that, and this isn't very rehearsed, and I know you're very intelligent business people and so on, so don't get me wrong. But this wrapper here, I mean, when you come to College Hill, the experience of the architecture of Brown and the surrounding residential buildings, it's very impressionable. And I think you want to get out of the gate with something much more traditional. And I know people say, oh, it's dollar signs and architectural carpentry and Doric column. Let's be frank, ZDS are the architects.
Yes.
Whether you're predisposed to design that way, whether the budget can include that kind of cladding, I don't know, but I think that's what this district, that's what this neighborhood deserves. I mean, you could do some modern conceptual type thing that's cool, but when is the pendulum gonna swing back to creating buildings that resonate and complement what's around them and draws from what's around them? So it's not an exact comparison, but like you look at the Red Lion Inn, right? You go out to, what town is that in? Stockbridge. I mean, that's this enduring landmark. This building needs to be impressionable. People need to come away and say, and where it creates a buzz, people talk about, oh, did you see the new inn? Over at Brown, in community. Now, one quick comparison would be the Ocean House in Watch Hill. Now, I know that's a larger hotel, and I hear some chuckles because that was a big expense. But it proves that you can do a modern building with modern facilities, all the whistles and bells, and clad it in a way that's faithful to tradition. So I just feel that this is a site that deserves a building of that caliber, and that if ZDS isn't predisposed currently, it should rise to the occasion and see what you can do to get it moving in that direction. One more quick comment is that I think it's really unfortunate that the building where Mr. Bishop's offices is going to be dismissed. I think that's very frustrating to see. Perhaps it's naive to speculate, but if there's an empty lot, I mean, I think you should at least offer that building and perhaps the one on the corner I should be directing this to Mr. Bishop, to a nearby property owner or the city, or maybe there's a nonprofit that could take those buildings and move them and resite them nearby for affordable housing and what have you. So thank you.
Thank you.
But what did, Wheeler School?
Can't hear you.
I'll repeat it for her. Yeah, the question was, what did Wheeler School particularly say about the process, the design? And I'll let others on the team comment, but my takeaways were that they liked the fact that a hotel was going to be close by. It was something that they could utilize. We talked a little bit about how we can do a better job of meeting the corner. If it was something they understood why we came to the corner with the building mass, but maybe on the 5th and 6th floor there was an opportunity for some relief to get a little bit more daylight onto Angell. But
Do they have any concerns about this hotel?
Well, they continue to harp, they continue to mention 3 key points for them, and forgive me if I don't get them all right, but it was about safety, it was about flow, and it was about, can you guys help me? There were a couple of things that they really spent a lot of time talking
Yes,
about.
safety, preserving their safety, their future uses, and traffic.
Mhm.
And just so we don't overstate it, we do not have, I don't wanna misrepresent, we've met with Brown, their buildings committee, the headmaster, and
we
the
had
head of school, and, I should say, and
It's gonna be a
Swan.
continuing dialogue.
Yeah, and we're in discussions with them, and, you know, they haven't kicked us out yet.
Lady in the green shirt, or the blouse. Please. You.
Green, okay.
That's what I saw.
One of my concerns, I mean, I tend to agree that this is not a very attractive building and that it feels very massive. It makes me think of the one that's on Thayer Street where, the Gilbane building where there was no setback required. Now, I understand on Thayer Street, okay, but this is not. This is taking over a residential area, and if you could you need a setback to give it some breathing space so it doesn't feel so massive. I mean, we all agreed after the 60s brutalist architecture that maybe that wasn't a good idea. And you know, those columns feel very massive. And to include a setback from the street, you know, of whatever it is, 18 inches or whatever, but to create a green strip, columnar trees, bushes, that would make a world of difference and make it feel a lot less massive.
We agree, thank you.
In the event that the zoning variances that you require are not granted, is there a Plan B location?
I can't say that, no.
Well, I know you're gonna say that, Ed.
No, I certainly don't know.
Right, I understand that, but is there anything else in the area?
I've been looking for 10 years, so.
I think one thing that should be said about Plan B, of course that's up to smart hotels relative to a space. Plan B for us is not the status quo.
This is
Those-
Brian Bishop
Yeah.
and Ed's son.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that, you know, so one shouldn't presume that the option is a hotel or the status quo. That's simply not.
So you're tearing the homes down
Fine.
one way or
Well,
another.
I can't say I would say that there's either going to be a sale or a change in use, and that's precipitated by our moving forward with a development plan that really prevents renting within the college cycle. I mean, our buildings, as has been pointed out, our buildings will be out of the college rental market. People are renting right now for a year and 2 years from now. And by removing those buildings from the college rental cycle, we will have a change of use. May not be a hotel, that may not be ultimately what the city decides, and that would also open up the question of, you know, what other interested, I mean, the institutions have expressed interest, there are other businesses, and I don't mean to create that as they could be, you know, of course, you would look at that and take it in as you see it, but the alternative here is not maintaining the status quo. The expense of properties in that area is such that the status quo won't support them, and it's been our own ability to hold them is compromised by, you know, having decided this was as close as we could come to think about realizing this vision. And if that's not the vision to be realized, it'll be something else.
Hi, Kevin George, we have a couple of questions, one for Rob and one for the group. Could you just dumb down, particularly for me, what the zoning and use issues are? Because in your documentation that you submitted, you have to go before the city council for a zone change, but then I'm assuming if you get the zone change, you're requiring a use change as well.
No.
Could you just walk us through that?
Sure, no, we're not,
And I reserve the right for another question.
Yeah, Seth, thank you. We're seeking 3 things. A change of the zoning map that the city council has the power to decide on. To change it from a residential professional zone, which does not permit the hotel, to a C2 zone, which does permit the
For just those properties that are outlined right there?
That's correct, just for the, so this would be changed to be the same color as all these properties across the street.
Right, and some, I'm not meaning to be argumentative, some would call that spot zoning. I'm
No,
just
well,
saying that,
Yeah, well, very few, anybody knowledgeable about that concept would hesitate to use that phrase.
I told you I wasn't that.
Yeah, because of the zone, so we're not proposing to put a C2 in the middle of a residential zone. And that's why I spend so much time going through the history of the mapping, because we have these commercial zones immediately adjacent to us and across the street.
It's creep, not spot.
Thank you.
Now, the second thing we're asking for is master plan approval from the city plan commission, because it's greater than 10,000 square feet of development. The city plan commission has to grant that approval.
Right.
The city plan commission also makes a recommendation to the council on the former issue as well.
Right.
And then the third thing we're asking for is relief from the parking requirement. We're not asking for more parking, we're asking for less parking, because the city ordinance that requires one parking space for every room is an antiquated measurement, and so we need some relief there. So those are the three things we're asking for.
Thank you. And just one